This video is a brief review of the nervous system for my EMT class. We can break the nervous system into two parts. The first one is the central nervous system, and that's going to include your brain and your spinal cord. Your spinal cord runs down the spine, and these are the vertebrae of your spine. The top region is the cervical. There's 7 of them there. You come down to the thoracic. There's 12 vertebrae there. The lumbar region has 5. The sacrum has 5 that are fused together, and then the coccyx or tailbone has generally 3, some people say 4. So all total we have about 33 spine, or 33 vertebrae. A vertebrae looks similar to this, and this is looking at it from the top. Here would be the front or the anterior of the body, and this would be the back of your body, or posterior. So the body of the vertebrae is the biggest part, and it's mainly bone. There's a disc, cartilaginous disc, that goes between these. This hole right here is called the vertebral foramen, and right through here is where your spinal cord runs. Now we have other parts to this. We have the spinous process along the back, and this is what you actually can feel when you palpate along your spine. On each side of it, and we can't generally feel these when we palpate, are something called the transverse process. And these areas right here are places, and there's a couple more of them on the spine, or on the vertebrae, that articulate or touch the other vertebrae, and they move along each other there. And this gives us a pretty flexible spine overall. Now you can see that even though this area is where the spinal cord is, there's a whole lot more to a vertebrae. So some people may crack or break maybe a transverse process or spinous process, or maybe even through the body of one of the vertebrae, and they could have broken their back. But as long as this area is not damaged, the spinal cord may not be damaged. Now you have ligaments that attach along through here, and these help hold the vertebrae together. So anytime that we have a musculoskeletal injury and we damage some ligaments or tendons, we can have some pain and swelling. So even though the vertebrae itself may not be broken, if you have an area in here that's very swollen, it may begin to press in onto the spinal cord itself, and then we can have some neurological deficits from that. So even though we can't help, well, we can help, but we can't prevent the primary injury, which is when the spinal cord gets cut. We could help if there was a secondary injury where maybe they have a break or damage somewhere else and there's swelling that occurs into that. And that's the idea behind spinal motion restriction, is we minimize movement, so hopefully we minimize the swelling. Looking at a vertebrae from the side, you would have a disc that would come in here, and then another disc above it, and then your vertebrae stretches out from that. So I wanted you to understand that these are not flat bones. These are actually kind of very oblong shaped bones. So this down here at the bottom would be your spinous process, and these could be your transverse processes. So if we're looking at it from the top with the spinal cord, we have peripheral nerves that come out from the central nervous system, from the spinal cord, and they usually come off the front and the back, and then they branch together to form a ganglion here, and actually at this point here, moving on out this direction, we would have our peripheral nervous system. Looking at this a little bit closer, we have tracts, and I kind of think of these as like bundles of wires for our spinal cord. And these pictures, these circles, are not representative of anything in particular. If you want to go more into it, you can look up to see the different nervous tracts that run through the spine. But I want you to understand that when we assess someone for their sensory, motor, and circulation function, we are testing 3 different tracts. We're testing one that is light touch, and we usually do that with something like a 4x4 or a cotton swab. And then we would do something that's more of a sharper touch, and we could do that with like a paper clip or the tip of a pen. I try to avoid doing that with needles because that actually punctures through the skin, but something that's a little bit sharper. And then we also assess the motor function. And for hands, I like to have them grasp my fingers and squeeze, but then I also have them flex and extend their hands, and I have them splay their fingers out. And then with the feet, I have them push down like they're pressing on a gas pedal and pull up. And generally that gives us a good evaluation of the motor tract. So we have to check for a light touch, a sharp touch, and motor function. And then this will allow us to see if the entire spinal cord is more or less intact, or if a part of it is damaged. And we'll talk more about that in another video. As far as the nervous system itself, just as a little reminder, we can break this into central nervous system, which is our brain and spinal cord, the peripheral nervous system, which is the nerves that come off of the spinal cord. Our peripheral nervous system then can be broken into the autonomic nervous system and the voluntary nervous system. The voluntary nervous system is the stuff that we control, so these tend to be bigger muscles and are involved with things like writing and walking and talking and stuff that we consciously control. The autonomic nervous system is stuff that we do not consciously control, so we don't have to think about it, and these typically are things like digestion, constriction and dilation of blood vessels and bronchioles, and there's a few other things in there. The sympathetic nervous system, of course, is our fight or flight, and that tends to speed things up, causes some vasoconstriction, increased heart rate, bronchodilation. And then the parasympathetic nervous system is our rest and digest, or feed and breathe. And this is going to slow things down, so it's going to slow heart rate, it's going to dilate blood vessels and drop the blood pressure, and a few other functions. So this is just a little overview of the nervous system for my EMT class. I hope you find it helpful, and if you have any questions, either leave them in the comments below or ask me when you're in class.